guys, Matt, IronTrap Garage, working on the free tee again. If you watch my Instagram at IronTrap, probably a month or more ago, there was a photo of me with a middle finger and a door for the tee. And basically, I went into the project without planning it very well, and the door panel didn't go as planned, and I had to scrap it. Took a step back, kind of thought about what I wanted to do, how I wanted to tackle it, and we're at the point where I really need to do these doors because it's the last thing we need to do before I can get into doing spot welding and hammer and dolly work and kind of getting it ready for actual like filler, primer, and hopefully paint. So we're going to tackle making this door today for the driver's side, and then we'll jump and do the other side after this, of course. So what I have here, a mistake I made the first time is I made a paper pattern of, this is for the other side, but I made a paper pattern for the door, and I took it off of our original door that came with the car. Well, if you guys remember, if you've been watching this car, the whole bottom of these doors is kind of sculpted out of fiberglass mesh, so the shape just doesn't stay, and when you're making the pattern, it didn't get a real good shape of what the door jamb was. So when I made my panel, fit it to the door jambs, it didn't fit because my pattern had moved when I was tracing everything, and it just didn't work out. So what we're going to do is take this door off. I got a piece that's way too big. What we're going to do is actually slide it down between the exhaust here and clamp it to the body with it being way too big. Then we can trace or scribe the backside of the door opening exactly, and we know that that's the shape that we need to match when we're doing the door, so that we're not trying to take the pattern off of a door that is kind of flexing or moving when we're closing the door. So get this scribed out, get everything laid out, and then we can start tipping the edges and hopefully making this, and we don't have another piece that's NFG. So let's get started. Guys, so we got our panel all laid out. I figured it'd take a second before we do some rolling in the bead roller to just show you what we're doing and why we did it. So the first shot, what we did is we laid the panel in on the car. We had some guide coat here we sprayed on, and we scribed a line for our door opening in that. So that's the exact line of where the door opening is. Now, because we need this door to shut inside of the opening, we actually needed to come back off of that. So we did. I measured a gap basically on a Model A and also on the T to get an idea of what the gap was on a car like this. Basically about 3/16 is what we came out with for an acceptable door gap. These cars do flex quite a bit, so I'm leaving the door gap a little wider than you would see on like a full-blown show car or even a modern car. So what we did is we came 3/16 off of our opening line. We scribed the second line on the inside here. That's going to be our bend line. That's where we want to fold the panel in, and that's what you're going to see on the front of the, on the outside of the car. That's what you're going to see. We also scribed a third line that we cut off, and that was basically our cut line. that we needed to do. I left the panel wide here like it needs to be the whole way around. It's about 1.5 inches on the whole entire door is the width of the flange. 1.5 inches, 1 3/4 is what it was. So we made that on the outside. The problem I had on my last panel was I left that full 1.5 inches or 1 3/4 all the way around the panel, and when you're rolling and tipping this edge, the metal has to go somewhere on an outside corner like this, and you need to actually shrink the panel as it goes around this corner. Well, 1.5 inches on steel is a lot to shrink, especially on these big corners here, that I just couldn't get it done with the tools that I have and my skill level, honestly. I just wasn't able to shrink that and keep the panel under control so that it fit. And once I got it over and I tried to shrink it, the panel just didn't fit the door jamb right. It had a big belly in it that I wasn't happy with. So we scrapped it, and here we are. So I got some advice from another guy that's a lot better than I am, Nate Lagler. He's a really good guy. And he kind of gave me a tip. It's something I sort of should have known, is to cut off this flange here and make it shorter so that I have less material to shrink. And once we tip this edge over, then what we can do is I can just weld a little flange on. I have a lot better chance of welding the flange on with the TIG and getting it finished out nice and straight myself with the tools that I have than by doing it and trying to hand shrink all these areas in the corners. So that's why we have the panel cut in. Basically right where the panel starts to curve, we cut it down to a 1/2 inch flange so that that'll be easy to keep it under control, not as much metal to shrink. And then when we're done and we got the panel fit, I'll add a little bit on the extra so that it looks like it should, finish out that weld, but basically never be able to tell that it's been modified, and that's a way that we can do that. So got our line in here, I got my sharp tipping wheel on the bead roller with a hard bottom wheel, and we're going to slowly go along and tip this edge and try and get it brought up. We'll walk back and forth with the shrinker and the bead roller, tipping it until we get it to where we want it and get it under control, and hopefully it fits and we're not throwing it away. Alright, so we got the panel turned about as much as we could in the bead roller. The line's pretty crisp. We've been doing some hammer and dolly work on the bench with it to get the edges turned, working it in the shrinker back and forth 100 times. And we got everything kind of going in the right direction, I hope. And one thing I've been doing, and I want to show you guys, is when hammering this edge on the bench, we have it down like this and we're hammering on this edge, trying to tip these real wide edges up. What's happening is it starts giving right here in the panel, and after you start hammering it, you actually start getting a bulge in the panel right here because it's actually kind of bending the whole panel as you're hammering that edge because it's 18 gauge steel. It takes a lot of effort to bend it. So what we were doing is putting it on the edge of the anvil here, and we were using this. I've had this for years. This is something Eastwood used to sell. We don't sell anymore, but you can still find them out there if you look hard enough. But it's basically a block of hardwood with some leather over top of it. And what you can do is this kind of, it keeps the panel from marring when you're hitting on it. So I hit on these outer edges and it's kind of a sacrificial piece. And with the leather and the wood, it doesn't damage the panel. And you can hammer it over this edge here to turn it like this. Normally when you're hammering with a hammer and dolly, when you hear that ringing, you're stretching because it's metal on metal and you're crushing the metal in between and you're stretching it. But because it has give with the wood and the leather. Even though you hear that ringing, you're not really stretching the metal. So you're safe there, and you can hit a little harder and kind of planish it out. The other thing we were doing, we had a shot of it, is we were hammering on this face here. For anything, as you're folding this edge over, it's going to still want to give a little bit. So what you're going to find is you're going to get a little bit of a bulge in the panel there, like we were talking about. And even on the anvil, you still kind of get that. So what we were doing is we were hammering on the face here while holding down. And by hammering on that, it helps crispen up this edge, gets rid of the kind of bulge in the panel. And you keep working back and forth with folding this over 90, hammering on the front lightly, and you can basically keep this nice and flat and keep it from having a big kind of bulge in the panel right next to your bend. So now these corners here, we're getting them folded over pretty good. What I have here that works really well is I have a post that goes to my anvil like that, and I have an old dolly that is welded to a piece of solid square stock. That fits in there like that. Just need that hammer over there. And we can fit that in. And because the shape of this matches pretty closely with this sharp edge in the panel, we can basically fit this over here and we can hammer on it. We can keep hammering on that and kind of planish out that edge as we roll it over. When we're doing it on the bench, it's kind of hard to get in there and hammer it right, so by doing it on the anvil, we can go a little quicker as we hammer this. If we get any little tiny puckers in the panel, I can kind of crush them out on this piece here. I've done a lot of the shrinking ahead of time in the shrinker. I kind of over shrunk this area, so once we had it folded over and I couldn't get in the shrinker anymore, it'll all kind of balance out. It seems to be doing pretty good in this corner here. So I can keep working this edge with the leather slapper back and forth, and we should have this thing at least all the edges turned about 90 here shortly. And we can kind of test fit it in the door opening, make sure that it's pretty close. Then we have to start working on shrinking all these edges to get it to have the right curve to match the body of the car. So we are past one hurdle, but we still have a bunch more to go. So I'm going to keep hammering on the panel. Alright, so after getting all the edges hammered over, they're basically about 90. We need to do a little bit of planishing on the flanges, but overall it's not too bad. We put the door in. That's kind of like the oh crap moment, because as you're building this whole door, we're tipping this edge, we have no idea if this is going to fit or not. I mean, the scribe lines we made earlier were really accurate, but you still have that thought in the back of your head that we might tip all these edges, do all this work to get everything so the lines are all crisp, put it in, and the door doesn't even fit at all. Like we, came off a line or something. Put it on, it actually fits pretty darn good. Like I mentioned, we left the gap a little wider than a modern car. It's about 3/16, or a little over an 1/8. And we put it together. I use these cool little panel gap tools from Eastwood that are little suction cups with adjustable plastic plates that you can put in between. And basically get them all the same all the way around. We put it in so that the door's kind of sitting where it needs to be with about that same gap throughout, just a little over an 1/8. And it's fitting pretty good. I'm actually happy with it. It was a little nerve-wracking putting it on, but it looks good. So we have it kind of with magnets and these little panel gap tools. We have it sitting in place and it's holding itself pretty good. Now what we need to do is get the curvature of the door to fit the door jamb a little better so we can really start dialing stuff in. What you can see, I kind of have a shot at this angle so you can see along the bottom here it's pretty close. It's off just a little bit here because of just using magnets, but the bottom edge of the door, there isn't a ton of curvature there and it fits pretty good. It comes off a little bit here, but overall it's not bad. Where the curvature really needs help is pretty much from here to here before it gets into that bottom corner. There's a slight curve there. If you go back in the videos when we were making the door jamb, you may remember that we were shrinking this area to give that curve to match the original door. So we need to put that curvature in there, so that's telling us we need to shrink from about here to here. It needs shrink to kind of give the door that curvature. On the back side it's a little different. It's basically flat from the bead, from the body line, to right before the curve. And then down in the curve here is where most of that shrinking needs to occur to kind of bulge the door out. So it's got curve coming this way, there's a curve coming that way. So we need to get in there with the shrinker, shrink that, that's going to bring it out, get it to match the outside of the body. Should work pretty well. So we're going to start with this front one, get it fitting as good as we can right here. Then we'll move to the back, get that fitting pretty decent. And then once that's fitting pretty good, we should be able to just come back, do a little adjustment along the bottom with the shrinker, and then just jump around and just get it all fitting pretty good. And get it all looking good, fitting real good. Then we can work on lining up where this bead needs to go on both sides. And then we can kind of hopefully be on the home stretch. So we'll get this fit up a little better, start with shrinking, and we'll check in a little bit. Alright guys, so we got the door laid out, it's fitting on here pretty good, and we put some die-cam or layout fluid on the door so you can see what we're scribing. I've been playing with how I wanted the bead to ride along the outside of the door, how I wanted it to look, and I've probably got a lot hours into standing back and looking at all this. Right, Moon? Go ahead, buddy. And what I ended up doing is putting a tape line right on the center of the bead from the body here, running it as straight as I could across the door, and then basically running it to almost into the center of the bead on the cowl. Just tried to make the line as natural as possible so everything's going to flow when you're looking at the side of the car. So the problem is we need this line, this is the center of the bead, the top of this tape here. We need that line to be on the other side of the door because when we're rolling the bead, we actually need the top die to be on the inside. So to transfer this line over, what I decided to do, because we just had this door kind of rough cut in the beginning and it's not even, we basically made marks about 2.5 inches up along the tape, and then we ran a straight edge across and scribed a line in there that's about 2.5 inches up from where we want our center of our bead to be. So what that will allow us to do is we're going to cut this whole top piece of metal off, and then we can run a scribe or a pair of dividers right from the top edge of this door, our cut line, and have it 2.5 inches down, and it will scribe the same line on the other side. That will be our bead line. Then we know we can run right off of that line. It's going to match where we have it here, and then after we have the bead rolled, then we can bend it down, and it should be pretty good. Yeah, hopefully everything works out. So we get cut. Alright, so we got the door fit up. As you saw, it fits really well. We nailed the bead, and the bead looks really good on the side of the car. I'm happy with it. So now what we need to do is roll the top of this over. So on the original door, it rolls, there's basically two little valleys, and you can see them by the lines when you roll a bead. On the door, there's the valley down here, and it goes up, and then instead of coming down to another valley, it just bends over. Now that was formed when the door was made originally, and I don't have a way to do that without making another set of bead roller dies. This is the best way I figured out. So what I did is I made a test piece here, and basically what we're going to do is we're going to put the brake right on the top of this, on this top line here, when it's flipped upside down. Clamp it down in the brake and break that edge. And what that'll do is leave us like the sample piece I have here, and it breaks it over and looks just about the same as stock. It flattens the bead out at the top, very top edge, just a tiny bit. If it looks funny, what I can do is I'm going to take a little trim hammer really carefully and raise up that little flat spot, and then we can DA it with the sander and get it to blend in nicely. I may just leave it depending on how offensive it looks. It's really not that bad on this piece, but that's what we're doing. Now the only other thing we have to keep in mind is because this is bent down already, we're not going to break it to what would seem a full 90 on my brake. I have my gauge for 45, 90. We're not going to do that because when you bend it to 90, it's going to be over 90 because this edge is already pushed down and the bead's already going in that direction. And then it comes back to flat. So we're going to actually bend this more like a 45 in reality on my gauge, which will put it at about 90. So that might that's something that if you're doing this job, you definitely want to think about. I messed it up when I first did this test panel, so learn from my mistakes. So we're going to put in the brake, get it bent up, and we'll have a three-dimensional door here in a second. Alright, so we got the door on, got the edges all tipped. You saw we put a piece of box tubing in that's for our bracing that we're going to be using. On the top side at least, we got a piece cut in, and we used the leather slapper to roll that edge over top. I slapped this sharp edge a little bit with the metal slapper and went over with the DA. I still need to do a little more work. Right in here is coming in really nice. That line's going away, it's flowing in, and should look really good. Up here in the front, I just need to do a little bit of more work. I need to get some more bracing in the door because I can't really hammer on it too hard. With the door not having any bracing, it's still going to start affecting down in here, and it's going to like bend it a little bit or put a little buckle in the panel. We even had it started to get a little bit of one right there, so I wanted to stop. But door fits nice. Cleat goes right in place. Everything looks good. This bead looks nice. Everything lines up real good. Got a little bit of damage here in the body right in here that I noticed. This is the problem with making crap cars look decent, is once you fix one thing, you notice something you didn't notice before. So this area in here was all damaged. I never noticed it, so I'm going to need to cut a little piece out of there probably and repair that. The bead is torn a little bit. Just the stuff that comes up. But door looks awesome. Big thing that I was trying to do with this project, other than get rid of a door that's half fiberglass, half metal, is I wanted to get rid of the bead that was around this whole door that we started with and make it nice and smooth looking, because there's no bead around the perimeter of the door. I thought it looked odd. It looked like the door didn't match the car. So that's why I want to get rid of it. So now we just have a bead across the top. It's nice and smooth. It fits the car. We can bolt our Brookville door skin right on the car. Ready to go. Bolt-on modification. No. I got way too much time in this door, but it looks good. So now what I can do is I'm going to make the other side, and then once I get both sides clecoed in, then I'm going to work on getting the hinges and latches all fit. Because I left that 3/16 gap around the door, we know that we have plenty of room for the door to open and shut, and we should be able to just get everything fit in with the latches and all that, and we should be good to go. But this is the important part. The door fits the opening, looks good, it flows when you look down the side of the car, and from standing completely from the side, it looks really good. So that's all I got with this one. Thank you guys for watching. Hopefully this was helpful for some of these tips we showed along the way. As always, we do videos on Tuesdays on the free T. Fridays we do Sweetheart Roadster, whatever else is going on, car shows, adventures, picking, whatever. And then Sundays we've been trying to add some videos of Andrew's project. So he's been working on his new Model A frame, and which will be a Model T eventually. He's been working on that, so we're doing Sundays on that. So make sure you're subscribing. If you like the videos that you're doing, we don't ask for money, we don't ask for any of that crap. We do this for fun. Share it with your buddies. We want people to subscribe and like the channel, and then you also get notifications when each of these videos come out. Thanks guys, catch you later.